This special meeting of the City Council will come to order. Clerk will call the roll.
Counsel Delasola.
Here.
Counsel DeFlorio. Here. Counsel Hanlon.
Here.
Counsel Mangan.
Here.
Counsel Marchese. Counsel McKinnon.
Here.
Counsel Napolitano.
Here.
Counsel Sechetta.
Here.
Counsel Sani.
Here.
Counsel Simonelli. Counsel Capone.
Here.
9 members present, Mr. President.
9 members present. We have a quorum. Please rise and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll have our clerk read the first item of business.
I think somebody took it on me. Oh, here it is. Item number 1 is a public hearing on an order adopting a residential exemption for the annual property tax levy. Be it ordered by the City Council, City of Everett, as follows, in accordance with the requirements of Chapter 40, Section 56 of the Massachusetts General Laws as amended by Chapter 369 of the Acts of 1982, and as determined by the Commissioner of Revenue, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the City of Everett hereby adopts a homeowner's residential exemption for the annual property tax levy that began July 1, 2015, and ends June 30th, 2016.
It's a pleasure of the council. Chair.
Can we invite the guest up to do a presentation, I believe?
Sure. And if the council would like, for purposes, I believe the Assessors Department only has one general presentation for everything. Perhaps we suspend the rules, have the clerk read the second item as well, and have them make the presentation on both pieces at the same time.
So moved.
Okay. So moved and second to suspend the rules, read item 2, and take them collectively, and invite members of the Assessors Board forward. All in favor? Opposed? You have so moved. Clerk will read the second item of business.
Item number 2 is an order adopting a minimum residential factor for the annual property tax levy. Be it ordered by the City Council of the City of Everett as follows, that the City of Everett hereby adopts the lowest minimum residential factor for fiscal year 2016 as determined by the Commissioner of Revenue, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and in accordance with the requirements of Chapter 40, Section 56 of the Massachusetts General Laws as amended by Chapter 369 of the Acts of 1982.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. In furtherance of that motion, if we could have members of the Assessors Board before us for purposes of the presentation. Good evening, gentlemen. If you could, please, just for the record, state your name.
Good evening. I'm Bill Hart, Chairman of the Board of Assessors.
Carl Sarabian, Assistant Assessor.
Thank you, gentlemen. Unless there's any objection from the council, we'll just have them proceed to a presentation. Whenever you're going to speak, make that green. Other than that, leave it red. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to come before you this evening. Before I begin, I'd like to thank a few people because this process, although it culminates in a hearing this evening, there's a lot that goes into the document in preparation for this hearing, along with many interactions with other state agencies. The chief amongst them, of course, is the Department of Revenue. Let me thank Pam, who's the chief assessor, who isn't able to be with us this evening. She's tending to a sick family member. Carl Sarabian, who is ably assisting tonight on the presentation. I'd also like to thank all the members of the assessing department who put so much time and effort into the detail on this, and I'd like to thank them publicly, along with the board, Joe Tazzi, and also member Kathy Bernier, who's joined me in the audience tonight, and of course all of you, because each of you in your own way has contributed to the success of this process throughout this year, and of course for those who've been around a while, you've been very engaged in this process one-on-one with me and the members of the staff, and of course with great questions at the culmination of the hearing. For your purposes of tonight's presentation, I have overhead for the audience to see the presentation. On your desk, you can follow along with the handout that we provided for this.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask, I'm sorry to interrupt
Sure.
you. Would you mind using the other microphone? I guess that one's not picking up as well. That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Great.
And you just have to press it so that it's green, and then there you go.
Good.
Thank you.
Great. So I hope you didn't miss all that other good stuff I started with. Great. So again, for the purposes of our audience and the people at home, I have an overhead piece behind the chair of the group, and Carl will assist on that, and in your place, you'll have the printed handout. So as the order calls for, we have two purposes here this evening on the classification hearing, and of course, the all-important residential exemption that we would ask a vote for as well at the conclusion of this, and of course, the public hearing. So if you just turn to page 1, in your handout, it's at page 2. The purpose of the classification hearing is defined under Mass General Law, and we're doing that this evening, conducting a public hearing for the benefit of the folks at home, and of course, for the members of the City Council who will, upon your approval, we'll go back and do what we need to do to continue the process of setting the tax rate. This does not change any of the mechanics of what we do. This is just explaining how we arrived at the numbers, what it means for the community, and of course the tax rate, and where we go from here. So we're here because the Department of Revenue is certifying our properties. They've been classified, they're certified, and now the public hearing. What that process entails is the Department of Revenue looks over reams and reams of paperwork that we send to them in a time frame consistent with the rules of the department, and we provide them with a very detailed analysis of the real and personal property throughout the city of Everett. We're presenting this information tonight as a Board of Assessors. We are the authority for the city of Everett, and on behalf of the city, setting the rate independent of other influences. We look at strictly the facts. So what happened tonight, we're going to have you vote on two different issues. One is the selection of the minimum residential factor, commonly referred to in circles as the MRF hearing, and then the residential exemption itself. Just by way of background, approximately 30% of the cities and towns in Massachusetts have what we call a split rate, meaning that we separate residential from commercial industrial burden, if you will. And so Everett, if they chose not to go a split rate, we would have a single tax rate for all property, residential, commercial, industrial. And based on the information that we've been calculating with to get us to this point tonight, that rate would be $21.71 per thousand. So if you own a single-family home and you are next door to a business, you would both be paying the same amount per thousand. If you choose to shift, which we would be proposing this evening, it splits that calculation between residents and commercial industrial. How do we get to this? There's a lot of other things that bring us to this point. This year, we have calculated the levy to be, or the need for this city to raise $93,653,216. We're able to raise, under the law, $99,542,806. That would be the levy limit. So the capacity was almost $6 million. We, of course, don't want to continue to go to the taxpayer looking for more money than we may need. Of course, we operate the city with much more than that we're raising from tax dollars. It's from other revenues and other resources. But what we believe that we would need to raise from the tax base is $93,653,216. Last year, that levy in 2015 was $90,369,956. Again, the classes of property in Everett: residential, commercial, industrial, and personal. And of course, personal property are those things that businesses have that we would also tax, and we take inventory of that in any number of businesses that operate throughout the city, those especially who aren't exempt from personal property. Just again, by way of a little bit of information, the levy limit, that is the number I gave you just a minute ago, the amount of money that we can raise up to that $99 million. We aren't raising that amount of money, but if we had so chosen, the 2.5 override, if you will, Proposition 2.5, would allow us to continue to raise that amount needed by 2.5% each year. We have chosen not to go any higher than what we actually need. The rest is explanation. It is just, in fact, the definitions of the amounts that I've provided on the previous page. And for those of you who've been here for a while, I think you're pretty accustomed to seeing those definitions. Again, excess levy capacity is that amount that we are not raising, but we have the capability to do so. So page 9 in your handout is just that calculation, if you will, of the amount of money that we are eligible to raise. And of course, the new growth is part of that calculation. New growth accounts for things in your tax rate, personal and residential properties, that we are now adding to our base for taxation. And this year, we added over $2 million, and in fact, $2,669,645. So, just a simple arithmetic there. You can see how we arrived at the actual levy. Here's the shift that we talk about year to year, which again, this isn't new to folks in the community who've been here. We look at what we are willing to shift away from the residential owner and towards the commercial industrial base. So if we went back to that first number I told you, $21.71, and we didn't do any shift tonight, everybody in the city of Everett would pay the same rate per thousand, whether they had a single-family home, a three-family home, or a large industry in any corner of our neighborhoods, including mom-and-pop stores. When you vote to do the shift, you are now allowing that rate to be split between two classes, residential being one, and the other commercial, industrial, and personal, CIP. And what I have there for you is some examples of the categories that will result in taxation difference. So type property you see in the left-hand column of the page, single family, two family, three family. In FY15, that's an average value in those properties. What they paid in taxes on those properties. In FY16, that same single-family home, the average went up almost $20,000 in value. Same with the two-family, they went up almost $27,000, and the three-family's value in Everett went up almost $30,000. And so you can see that our values are going up in the community based on sales transactions and other evaluative tools that we use throughout the year. Now, why do I put that on there? It is because from these numbers, these numbers, we determine what the 20% exemption would mean in tax dollars to the homeowner, and of course, what that exempts them from off of value. So if we adopt later on this evening the residential exemption, which is the maximum 20%, that single-family home would see a $3,071.53 tax bill with a residential exemption, without a residential exemption versus with it. Why do we have to vote on a residential exemption? The residential exemption is covered under Mass General laws. As you can see, I've cited the law, and it's only to people who occupy their residence. We, of course, in the assessor's office continue to monitor that because there's a lot of transactions in the course of the year. People move out, people move in. Some people sell property, some people move out and use it as rental property. So the assessing staff, through a number of processes, follows those transactions to ensure that those who are rightfully due an exemption under this law get it, and those who should be paying without exemption are also being charged appropriately. So there are a couple of exclusions to the exemption, vacant land being one of them, and obviously residential properties not occupied as someone's primary residence. I put this on the slide because it seems like from year to year, people say, well, what about I own two houses, I own the one next to me. You're only eligible for the residential exemption on one parcel, the one that you claim as your domicile, not the one next door, even though you own it and you live next door to it and maintain it. You're only eligible under the law for one parcel, and that's the one you live in. So what's the exemption value this year? So you take all the residential values across the city, which is a significant number. There's 8,539 parcels completely. So you have a average residential value of $329,255. What's the value of that? So it's just 20% of $329,255, which is a $65,851 exemption of value off of your home. And that, there's over 4,000 properties in Everett that currently qualify for that exemption. So again, I apologize if folks are trying to flip through the pages. I've taken the liberty of combining both presentations together for this hearing because it is really a whole package. Residential exemption calculation, I've continued it on the following page so you understand how we get the actual dollars off of their tax bill. And that's, again, pretty simple calculations and relatively self-explanatory. I'm happy to stop right there if there's any quick questions, Mr. President, of anybody. Otherwise, I'll conclude with, I know I see a few folks looking my way,
Yeah,
so I didn't want to
Thank
keep
you.
going.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you for the information here. I think it was excellent. Unless there's an objection from the council, I'd suggest that we open it to a public hearing first. Then we can bring it back before the council and ask whatever questions might be necessary. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr.
My
Hart.
pleasure.
We're going to open it to a public hearing, and then it'll be back in front of the council. And at that point, if you wouldn't mind entertaining questions, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, so it's been moved and second to open public hearing on item number 1. All in favor? All opposed? You so moved. So members of the audience, I'm going to ask 3 times if there's anyone in favor of the first item, which is the residential exemption. And then once I ask 3 times, that portion of the meeting, of the open hearing will be closed. I'll ask if there's anyone opposed to that 3 times. Then the matter will come back in front of the council. So for the first time, is there anyone in favor of the residential exemption? Is there anyone in favor of the residential exemption? Is there anyone in favor of the residential exemption? Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. I'll ask 3 times if there's anyone opposed. Is there anyone opposed to the residential exemption? Is there anyone opposed to the residential exemption? Is there anyone opposed to the residential exemption? Seeing none, the public hearing on item number 1 is closed. The matter is before the council. What is the pleasure?
Refer to the common council meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Council
I have
Hanlon?
a question.
Okay.
I'd like to have you, Mr.
Sure. Are there any questions? Would the members like to have the members of the assessment board
yes.
before us? Okay. If we could, please, Mr. Hart, if we could have you forward. Mr. Sarabian? Council Hanlon?
Mr. Chairman, through you to the Chairman of the Board of Assessors. Just one quick question, it means nothing, Bill. To the approximately 30% of cities and towns that have split rates, the ones we're talking about usually have a lot of commercial properties that have the split rates?
I would say so.
Yeah, okay, that's just a quick question. And what happened to the classification of open air? We don't have that anymore?
No.
We do have some open air in Everett?
We do. It is not a separate classification.
Okay. And my main question is that I'm looking at the, if you have your copy there, the page 9, and I just need you to explain to me one thing. Okay, it says that the fiscal year 2015 levy limit is $94 million.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering why you're using that figure, which is the levy limit from last year, and not the actual levy, which is $90,369,000 from 2015.
Sure.
Last year's levy limit is a historic number. It's based on the prior year's levy limit, which was then increased by 2.5%. And that number carries forward. The most important number that you want to focus on is not what the limit is, but really how much under the limit that we are. And right now, we're about almost $6 million under what we possibly could tax.
I understand that, and that's what I said. The levy for 2015 was under the levy limit.
Right.
So why did we use that $94 million figure instead of which is the levy limit, instead of the levy, which is $90 million?
Right, because because that's what you're allowed to tax at, so they take 2.5% at what you're allowed to tax at. Just because we didn't tax at that doesn't mean that we take 2.5% of what we actually did. It's what the limit. So you can grow 2.5% of your limit, not at what you finally decided. And like this year, we're only going to decide, I believe, at 93,653,000. But we could tax at 99. So we're going to take, next year when I come before you, if I'm lucky enough to be here, it'll be 2.5% on the 99. That's what you're eligible to increase.
That's a good answer. Thank you very
You're
much,
welcome.
both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think that's it. Thank you.
Counselor Sani.
Thank you. Question on condominiums. If the value is, say, 70,000, is the value at 20% that they're getting for a tax rate 65,851?
The law does make provisions for those parcels that may, if you adopt a residential exemption, that they have to pay 10% of that. So they could never either be at zero or that we owed them money.
Right.
They always have to pay at least 10% of that value. So even though there's an exemption, there are the people who get other exemptions that they're eligible under the law. The law says even though they may be eligible for one or several exemptions, they could never pay less than 10% of the actual value of that home. And it's always with condos, quite frankly.
Yeah, I
So
know
it's
that in the
not-
past
yeah.
they had some problems with the condo
Exactly.
being less than.
That's right, but they always have to pay, it's 10% of its value.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Counselor Mangan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Hart, just on the tax rate for commercial and residential last year to this year, if you could just, people always want to know what I know what it is, we have it down here, but if you could just explain to the public what the rate was last year and what it is this year.
So this year, if all is adopted the way it's been presented this evening, that you take the vote to shift the burden and make it the 1.75%, and for folks who are eligible for a residential exemption, the rate this year would be for residents, based on the way we've calculated, but it isn't certified yet. So I always, this is a caveat that I always get concerned on. In full disclosure, I try to provide you as much as I can, and I know in previous years I've been a little reluctant to state the number because then people walk away thinking, well, that's what it's going to be. There's always a chance that through a calculation at the Department of Revenue, once they get our vote tonight, they relook at something and tweak it, it could change a number. So I'm going to tell you that we've currently estimated the residential tax rate to be $14.45, and the commercial tax rate at $37.98.
What was it currently for 15?
The current residential rate is $14.61,
Okay,
and the current commercial rate is $39.45.
okay, thank you.
So the rate has come down in both categories.
How much was that?
The commercial rate is $39.45.
Got it. Okay.
Currently. What we're proposing is less. Yep.
Counselor Sachetta.
Yes, we're voting on the residential exemption. Are we voting on the tax rate itself tonight?
No, you're actually only voting on two things. You're voting on the shift to allow us to determine the tax rate for those classes. And the number I gave you a minute ago, as I said, with a caveat that it is what we would expect to post as your rates as long as you vote for the shift at 1.75, which has been historically what this council and others have done before you. So you're voting on that, the shift, and from that we determine the tax rate. What I'm proposing tonight is the numbers I think it'll turn out to be once the Department of Revenue gets your vote. You'll sign a document tonight attesting to the fact that you've done this vote and this shift. And the residential exemption is something that would allow, as you know, the homeowner-occupied folks to receive a discount, if you will, off of their value, which translates into certain dollars. So one to the other, it's a help to the folks in the community who are in residential property.
When do we vote on the actual rate?
You wouldn't actually vote on the rate. The rate is a calculation as a result of your vote tonight. It is, as I said, trying to be kind of fully transparent. I've given you what I believe, based on all the information that we have, and up to this point, the Department of Revenue certifies or reviews or gives us the go-ahead on any number of documents and items that we provide them. And so based on all the preliminary approvals and reviews, and the calculations of Pam and Kyle and the staff, the numbers I provided to you are our best calculation as of today. My sense is it won't change. I have seen in, well, many years past, it can change by a couple of cents, but generally that's very unusual. What we have before you tonight, in effect, will be your,
The reason I bring this up is some time ago at a meeting, we were discussing costs and taxes and all that. And the mayor was sitting right there. And I suggested at the time that we give the taxpayers a break. And I said, why don't we use some of the free cash that we have? He said, I'd be willing to do that. Is any of the free cash being used in this tax rate?
I believe, I'm understanding that $1 million was put towards the tax rate, if you will, in the calculation of this, to help offset the price per thousand. So yes, the answer to your question is yes.
Just 1 million.
That's my understanding,
And
and
we
I
have
you can
five-
certainly confirm that with folks, but I believe that is the
I
actual
believe
number.
we have 5 million in free cash, if I understand, the newspapers brought up the fact on a press release that we have 5 million in free cash and we're only using 1 million. How do we change that? Do we have to take a vote on it, or is it set that way?
I think that the calculation, the way it is, based on the information that the administration has, along with experts in the field, that there's a lot of reasons why you would hold more money in free cash for a host of reasons, one of which is bond rating, unforeseen expenses. Certainly, we have a growing and busy community. I think that the tax consultants, if you will, and I know that there's many out there that provide municipal support, would tell a community that they should hold a certain amount of money in abeyance, if you will. And I think that this is a very good start, that $1 million, which is not an insignificant number, is put towards the tax rate. Now, you know, if you had lots and lots of money, maybe you'd think about it differently, but I think that Everett is in a good position. I think it needs to stay in a strong position, and this is a way that we can stay in a strong position, continually support the taxpayers, the people who live in our communities by a residential exemption, shifting and putting some money from free cash into that to pull it all together and get the best possible outcome from the taxpayers' point of view and the city's fiscal stability. I think we have a great combination here, Councilor, and I appreciate your interest, though, because we all would probably want to know why, but I think there's a lot more to consider.
Is there any way for us to increase that 1 million to 2 million or 3 million? Or is it set that way?
Well, we've based our calculations on the $1 million with the Department of Revenue. I know that that would create, I think, an issue for us with the Department of Revenue at this late stage of the game. I mean, as we think about our tax bills will be coming out, the official tax bill will come out this coming month. And let me just say that while I appreciate your interest, and we all know that we want to help people, the $1 million, just as an example, provides some relief. It's not significant, so $2 million isn't going to make, it's about 15 cents on the tax rate. Not significant, really, in the scheme of things. I think the other measures that we've taken, like taxing only at 93 million instead of 99, if we went to 99, you know, you're going to be looking for more money from the taxpayer. This administration, this mayor said, no, we're not doing that to the folks. You know, there's enough burden out there. What other ways can we help them? We continue to offer the 20% exemption. That is significant. That has helped so many people in our community stay in their homes, because while we think about that as only 20%, it ends up to be dollars out of your pocket, which is important.
You're talking pennies, but the fact of the matter is, with the assessment going up, a single-family house is gonna be paying at least $200 more this year. Two-family house is gonna be paying close to $300 more, and a three-family house is gonna be a little over $300. So I was saying, you're
Yeah.
saying it's only 16 cents, but when you multiply it by thousands of dollars, it means quite a bit. And we keep on going up in the water rate, we keep on going up the tax rate, and I suggested to the mayor that we at least go down sometime. And he suggested, yeah, we'll use some free cash. I guess we're not gonna do it.
Oh, no, he did put $1 million toward that, and I appreciate your point of view.
But our tax rate is going up.
No, the rate's going
Not
down.
the rate,
Yeah,
but
the
the-
value's going up,
The
rate's going down.
Assessment's going up, and we're all gonna be paying $200 to $300 more per year this year.
Yeah, depending on your, now, those are averages that we provide, but individuals may see insignificant increase because, again, some of their value, your value may have gone up $5,000 on your house, and Council McKinnon, it may be $10,000, so his increase will look a lot different than yours. But in the scheme of things, we'd like to think that a healthy assessment means that the community is strong and growing, and the rate, of course, is sometimes a product of that as well. So I think we have a lot of good things in this picture to provide you to vote on, and I know it doesn't come haphazardly. It comes with a lot of research, a lot of review, a lot of comparisons, a lot of financial stability, questions that come up in meetings throughout the city, and of course with our partners in the state government. I think you've got a great, strong package to consider that will benefit the people of Everett, specifically those that live in the homes that they own.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council McKinnon, before you go as well, you're welcome to. We do have the second piece. We have to have the public hearing, and we do have our 7 o'clock meeting.
I just have a quick question, Mr. President.
Why don't you go right ahead, and then we'll act
Through you,
on
Mr.
this.
President, to Mr. Hart. Mr. Hart, if we were to, say, gain funds into the city through whatever means that was out there, we could apply at that time to put this towards the tax rate?
You would do it for the next cycle,
So that would be for 2016, correct?
17, yep.
17.
Mhm.
So it would go on it would be the 2016 that we would be looking at
Right, so
to
you're.
set the rate?
So if the city had a windfall and the administration, along with the city council, had a conversation about how we could use that windfall, I think that's an option, and that's an option that you would exercise in those conversations, but that wouldn't happen now. We're certifying in effect that what we voted on tonight is
Understandably.
appropriate.
Yep.
Yep.
So, all right, but if in fact, that would apply for the next year or the next cycle, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if there was to be some sort of windfall, say, we could apply it at, not that time, but it would be incorporated into the next year.
Right, and that would be a decision the administration would make, looking at all the pieces of our financial picture, but absolutely, it could, that's an option.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll excuse customary thanks. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
My pleasure.
The matters before you, the chair would entertain a motion to refer to the next meeting of the common council. Moved and second to refer item number 1 to the next city council meeting. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? You're so moved. Item number 2, we've already read. It is before us. Chair would entertain a motion to open a public hearing. It's been moved and second to open public hearing for item number 2. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? You've so opened. Item number 2, this is the minimum residential factor. This is a public hearing. I'll ask 3 times if there's anyone in favor of it. We'll close that portion of the meeting. I'll ask 3 times if there's anyone opposed to it, and then the matter will be back in front of the board. Is there anyone in favor of adopting the minimum residential factor? Is there anyone in favor of adopting the minimum residential factor? Is there anyone in favor of adopting the minimum residential factor? Seeing none, that portion of the hearing is closed. I'll ask 3 times if there's anyone opposed. Is there anyone opposed to adopting the minimum residential factor? Is there anyone opposed to adopting the minimum residential factor? Is there anyone opposed to adopting the minimum residential factor? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Matters before you, councilors. Council Hanlon.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we refer to the council meeting of this evening with favorable rebuttal.
I don't know that, Mr. Clerk, can we do it with the favorable? Okay. It's been moved and second to refer item 2 to our next meeting, which is this evening, with favorable recommendation. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? You've so moved. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
It's moved and second to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? You have adjourned. We'll take a 5-minute break, and we'll start up the 7 o'clock meeting then. Thank you.